some of the consequences of the French and Indian War. Well, I'm being glib a little bit here, but more war. It's not too far off. During the war, Indians had, for the most part, turned against British and American colonists to support French allies. But of course, we know that there were some Native Americans who supported the British as well. Most supported with the French. In the reality of war, it was many Native Americans sided with French, and many Native Americans sided with the British and the Americans. Now, during the war, the American government promised bounties for the scalps of enemy Indians. They didn't necessarily, a lot of Americans couldn't tell the difference between friendly Native Americans and enemy Native Americans. And so there was a lot of warfare against friendly Native Americans sort of by accident. And after the war, a lot of Native Americans recognized that they were not going to get any help from the British government. The French government is no longer there to support them. The British government is there, but they recognize they're not going to get a lot of help. And so they form what we call a Pan-Indian Confederation. That is, multiple Native American tribes, whether or not they were friendly or enemies during the war, they come together and create an alliance, a Pan-Indian alliance. And they follow a religious leader. His name is Neolin, and they follow a soldier who's a relative. Now, Neolin is a Lenni Lenape Indian, and he requires that Native Americans sort of reject any white culture, right? So Native Americans have to reject white things. They have to give up alcohol. They need to stop giving up their lands. And this group, this Pan-Indian Confederation, starts following a military leader named Pontiac. And these groups start raiding British forts. They attack British settlers, and they're hoping to put enough pressure on the British government to do something about who they are. Really, they're hoping to sort of rout the British and get the French to come back. And so the British call this Pontiac's rebellion, and Pontiac is an Ottawa chief. And this really spurs up racial hatred on both sides. Now, there's a group of Irish and Scots-Irish settlers on the frontier in Pennsylvania. I use the word frontier in quotations because it's not really a frontier. It's just this land where both Native Americans and colonists interact. And they're fed up with these attacks. And the Pennsylvania government is pacifist. They don't believe in warfare. And so the Quaker government has not supported defense against these Native Americans at any point. And on December 14, 1763, a group of Irish and Scots-Irish settlers that we call the Paxton Boys surprise an Indian village in Conestoga and kill everyone that lives there. And that's about 23 Native Americans, almost all women and children, who were peaceful Christian Indians. And then the Paxton Boys, after they kill them, they continue to another Christian Native American missionary at Nantucket, and you see it spelled there, and kill all the Native Americans there. Then they gather about 500 men, and they turn to Philadelphia to go find the Native Americans that are being sheltered in Philadelphia. There are some Native Americans who are Christian that are being sheltered by the Quakers in Philadelphia. So they decide the Quaker government is not protecting us, but they're protecting them. And so they descend onto Philadelphia. Now, they don't actually make it to Philadelphia. There's some German ministers that come out and talk to them, and they end up turning them around. The results of this is the Proclamation of 1763. Now, the Proclamation of 1763 is a proclamation by Britain that says American colonists cannot go past this line. And this line, as you can see on the map, is meant to sort of divide both the American colonists from the Indians in the same way that a parent might divide two siblings. You stay on that side and you stay on that side. Don't interact. Now, the American colonists really don't like this. The Native Americans, they get pushed off their land to a certain extent, but there is a promise that they will then have this land, and promises by the British government that they will then be able to keep that, and the American colonists will not encroach on them. But the American colonists really don't like this. They feel like they have had an opportunity taken away from them, and a lot of Americans have had it before this already crossed this line. So if you look at this map, George Washington had surveyed that land in 1754. The Virginians had looked at that land in the Ohio Valley so that they could expand that way, and a lot of American colonists actually owned land on the other side. Um, they had put money and property there, but they're not allowed to sell that land now because the British government says you're not allowed over there. So one of the theories is that someone like Jefferson and Washington and Madison, they want an American Revolution because they own land on that side. And the only way that they're going to get that land back, they're going to be able to sell that land, is if they become independent. And certainly, there are a lot of settlers who do cross that land illegally and settle there, but they're squatting because they're not allowed to buy the land and they're not allowed to sell the land. And because of all of this, the British really resent the American colonists, and the American colonists really start resenting the British. The British Empire is expanding, and they're starting to think about, how do we manage all of this land? And they're starting to look at the Americans and say, oh, you can afford higher taxes to keep up with us helping you with taking care of all of this land. The British pay a much higher tax than the Americans. The British pay about 26 cents for every 1 cent that Americans pay. The British are struggling, Americans are prospering. Americans are the ones who caused this war. They should pay for it. And so in 1763, after the Proclamation Line of 1763, the next thing that the British do is they think the Americans should have to pay for more taxes to pay for this war that they started.